The cowboy lived alone for years, until she came along asking to learn how to ride horses, and everything changed. Jack Sawyer had always loved the open plains. He loved the wide, endless sky that stretched above the hills, the smell of fresh grass after rain, and the sound of the wind rushing through the tall prairie. The plains were quiet, but to Jack, it was a comforting kind of quiet. It was a place where he could think, work, and just be himself. He had spent most of his life on this small ranch in Texas, taking care of the land, the horses, and the cattle. For 10 years, Jack had lived alone. The first few years after his family moved away, he felt lonely, but over time, he grew used to the solitude. He learned to enjoy the mornings when the sun rose over the hills and painted everything in gold. He learned to wake up early, feed the horses, milk the cows, and fix fences that the storms had damaged. Every task on the ranch was important, and Jack made sure that everything was done properly. He found pride in his work, even though no one else was around to notice. Jack was not a young man anymore, though he had the strength of someone half his age. His face was weathered from years in the sun, with deep lines near his eyes and mouth, showing the life he had lived. His hands were rough from years of working with ropes, saddles, and the heavy tools of a rancher. He wore a worn-out hat that had seen better days, boots that had been patched many times, and a dusty jacket that had become his constant companion. He didn't need much else. The ranch was enough. Some people in the nearby town thought Jack was strange. They whispered about him sometimes, saying he had chosen to live like a hermit. But Jack didn't mind what others thought. He had his horses, his land, and his routine. That was all he needed. He enjoyed his own company. Sometimes he talked to himself or to the horses, and that was enough conversation for him. Jack's favorite part of the day was early morning. Before the sun fully rose, he would ride out on his horse, a strong brown stallion named Rusty. Together, they would move through the fields, checking on the fences, counting the cattle, and making sure everything was as it should be. Rusty was more than just a horse to Jack. He was a companion. Jack trusted Rusty with his life, and Rusty seemed to understand Jack in a way that no one else did. Evenings were quiet. Jack would sit on the porch of his small cabin, drinking a cup of coffee, watching the sun sink behind the distant hills. The colors of the sunset reflected on the fields, turning the grass golden and red. Sometimes Jack would hear the soft cries of owls, the distant barking of a coyote, or the gentle rustle of the wind. He didn't mind the silence. In fact, he loved it. It gave him time to remember the past, think about life, and dream about things he rarely spoke of. Jack wasn't always alone. Before he moved to the ranch, he had friends, neighbors, and family, but life had changed, and now the ranch was his only home. There were times when he missed companionship, laughter, and stories shared around a fire, but he had learned to live without them. The solitude had made him strong, independent, and self-reliant. He didn't need anyone else to help him survive. He could do it all on his own. He loved the work of the ranch. Every day was busy and demanding, and that kept him focused. He would mend fences, repair broken gates, and water the plants. He would feed the chickens and milk the cows, gather hay for the horses, and make sure that the cattle were safe and healthy. The work was hard, but it was satisfying. When the day ended, he would feel tired but proud, knowing that he had done everything he could to care for the land and the animals. Jack had a small library of books in his cabin, but he rarely read them. He preferred practical knowledge, books about ranching, horses, weather, and farming. He read about how to train horses better, how to grow stronger crops, and how to keep the cattle healthy. He enjoyed learning new things that could help him make his life on the ranch easier. Knowledge in his mind was power, and he used it to make sure the ranch stayed in top condition. One of Jack's favorite memories was of the first horse he ever owned. It was a small foal, shy and timid, but Jack had spent weeks training it, teaching it to trust him. That horse had become his closest friend, and even now, years later, when Jack looked at Rusty, he remembered those early days with fondness. Horses had a way of sensing your emotions, he believed, and they responded to kindness and patience. Jack had learned that lesson long ago, and it had guided him through life. Though Jack had chosen solitude, he was not lonely in the way people usually thought of it. He had the animals, the land, and the rhythm of his work. He had his memories, too. The laughter of family gatherings, the lessons from his father, the songs sung around the campfire. Those memories gave him comfort, and sometimes when the wind blew just right, he felt as though the past was close, like an old friend visiting for a moment. Jack's life was simple but full. He lived by routines, respected the land, and cared for the creatures under his watch. He woke early, worked hard, and slept peacefully, knowing that he had given his best to the world he loved. There was beauty in simplicity, and Jack had discovered that happiness did not require crowds, parties, or noise. It required purpose, connection with nature, and the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Even as years passed, Jack never grew tired of the plains. The seasons changed, bringing snow, rain, heat, and wind, but each season had its own charm. Winter nights were cold and long, but the fireplace in his cabin kept him warm. Spring brought new life to the fields, new calves for the cattle, and the soft scent of wildflowers. Summer was hot, but the evenings were cool, and the stars shone brightly across the dark sky. Autumn painted the land with gold, red, and orange, and Jack loved to watch the leaves fall while sipping coffee on the porch. People in town often said Jack was hard to approach, but he wasn't unkind. He helped neighbors when needed, gave advice about ranching, and shared tools or supplies when someone asked. He just preferred to keep his life quiet. He liked the freedom that came with being alone, the freedom to make his own decisions, follow his own schedule, and live without interference. Jack had a strong sense of responsibility. The ranch was not just land. It was a home, a place that needed care and attention. He took pride in maintaining it, and he treated every animal with respect. Rusty, the cows, the chickens, and even the stray animals that sometimes wandered onto his land were part of his family. In caring for them, Jack found purpose, and in purpose he found peace. Night after night, Jack would sit under the stars, listening to the quiet hum of the world. He would reflect on his life, the choices he had made, and the dreams he had yet to fulfill. Though he had no one to share these moments with, he never felt truly alone. The land, the animals, and the endless sky were enough companions. Jack Sawyer had built a life of solitude, simplicity, and satisfaction. It was a life that some might see as lonely, but for Jack, it was full. Full of work, full of memories, full of quiet moments that brought joy and contentment. He was a man of the plains, shaped by the wind, the sun, and the endless horizon. And in that life, he had found a peace that few could understand, a peace that only the cowboy who loved the land and the freedom of solitude could truly know. Little did Jack know, however, that this quiet life was about to change. A visitor would soon arrive at his ranch, bringing curiosity, energy, and a spark that would stir emotions he had long kept buried. But for now, he rode Rusty through the golden fields, feeling the wind on his face, listening to the soft sound of hooves against the earth, and enjoying the simple, perfect life he had created. One bright morning, as Jack Sawyer was finishing the morning chores, he noticed movement at the edge of his property. At first, he thought it might be a stray animal, but as he squinted toward the rising sun, he saw a figure approaching on foot. It was a young woman, carrying a small bag over her shoulder. She walked with purpose, yet there was a gentle hesitance in her steps, as though she were unsure about entering someone else's land. Jack felt a twinge of curiosity mixed with caution. It had been years since anyone had come to his ranch unannounced. He adjusted his hat and called out, "Can I help you?" His voice carried across the open field, steady and calm. The woman stopped and smiled warmly. "Hello, sir. My name is Emily Hart. I was wondering, could you teach me how to ride horses?" Jack frowned slightly. Emily was young, perhaps in her early 20s. She looked energetic and determined, but he had not taught anyone in years, and he certainly wasn't in the mood for company that required patience and guidance. "I don't usually teach anyone," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "This isn't a school, it's a ranch." Emily's smile didn't falter. "I understand, sir. I'm willing to work hard, follow your rules, and learn anything you teach me. I've wanted to ride horses my whole life, but I don't know where to start. Please, I'll do anything." Jack studied her for a long moment. There was something about the way she spoke, honest, respectful, and full of energy, that made him pause. He hadn't met many people like Emily in years. Most of the town's folks kept their distance from him. They either judged his solitude or assumed he didn't want company, but Emily was different. She had courage and she had hope. Finally, Jack sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "I can show you the basics," he said slowly, "but you'll have to follow my rules. No shortcuts, no whining, and no wandering off alone. Horses can be dangerous if you're careless." Emily's eyes lit up. "Thank you, sir. I promise I'll follow your rules." She set her bag down and looked around at the ranch with awe. The barn, the fields, the fences stretching toward the hills. It was everything she had imagined a real ranch to be. Jack led her toward the stables. Rusty, his brown stallion, was waiting patiently, his mane brushing against the fence. Emily's face lit up at the sight of the horse. "He's beautiful," she said softly. Jack nodded. "That's Rusty. He's gentle if you treat him right, but he can be stubborn if you're not careful." The first lesson was simple. Jack taught Emily how to approach the horse calmly, how to speak softly, and how to extend her hand so Rusty could sniff and trust her presence. Emily listened intently, her eyes wide with fascination. She had read about horses before, but experiencing one up close was entirely different. "You have to move slowly," Jack instructed. "Never make sudden gestures. Horses can sense fear or impatience. If you're nervous, he'll be nervous too." Emily nodded and took a deep breath. "I understand," she said. Hours passed as Emily learned the basic steps. Jack showed her how to brush Rusty, saddle him properly, and hold the reins. Her hands were clumsy at first, and she stumbled a few times, but she never gave up. Jack's patience was tested, but he was secretly impressed. She reminded him of himself when he was young, eager to learn, full of determination, and not afraid to make mistakes. During a short break, Emily sat on the fence, sipping water from a bottle she had brought. "Sir, can I ask you something?" she said cautiously. Jack, who was wiping sweat from his brow, nodded. "Go ahead." "Why do you live all alone out here? Don't you get lonely?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. Jack paused. He wasn't used to such personal questions. Most people never asked, and if they did, they assumed he was bitter or unfriendly. But Emily wasn't judging. She genuinely wanted to understand. "I've been living like this for a long time," he said slowly. "It's peaceful. The work keeps me busy. I like the land, the horses. I don't need much else." He looked at her carefully. "It's not always easy. Sometimes it's lonely, but I've learned to be content." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "I think I understand. But maybe, sometimes having someone to share the work or even the sunset could make it even better." Jack looked away, staring at the horizon. Her words lingered longer than he expected. He didn't respond, but a quiet feeling stirred inside him. He had grown so used to solitude that he had forgotten the warmth of shared moments. The next few days were filled with lessons. Emily arrived early every morning, full of energy, ready to work. She helped Jack with chores, feeding the chickens, mending fences, carrying hay, and learned quickly. Jack noticed that her presence brought a lightness to the ranch. The horses seemed calmer, the morning chores more enjoyable, and even Jack felt a strange sense of companionship he hadn't realized he missed. They began riding together. At first, Emily could only ride slowly, her hands gripping the reins tightly, her posture stiff. Jack walked beside her, offering guidance and encouragement. "Relax your shoulders," he would say. "Let the horse move naturally. Trust him." Emily would nod, concentrate, and gradually loosen up. She fell a few times, scraped her knees and elbows, but always laughed it off. Jack admired her resilience. "You're tougher than most people I've met," he remarked one afternoon as they both brushed Rusty under the barn's shade. Emily smiled. "I'm learning from the best," she replied. Beyond the lessons, conversations began to flow naturally. They spoke about the ranch, about Jack's past, about Emily's dreams. She told him she had grown up in the city but always dreamed of living close to nature, of riding horses, and learning the skills of a real rancher. Jack, in turn, shared stories of his childhood, the times he spent learning from his father, and the lessons he had learned from the land and the animals. Jack was cautious with his stories, revealing just enough to connect, but keeping the deeper wounds of his past hidden. Emily sensed there was more, but she didn't push. She simply listened, laughed, and encouraged. Her presence was gentle, but it stirred something in Jack, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years: trust. One evening, after a long day of riding and chores, they sat on the porch of Jack's cabin. The sky was painted with shades of pink and orange as the sun sank behind the hills. The wind carried the soft scent of wildflowers and grass. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt a quiet happiness he hadn't known in years. "You know," Emily said quietly, "I think I could get used to this life. It's hard work, but it feels right. Honest." Jack looked at her, surprised by the truth in her words. "It's not easy," he said. "The work never stops. The land can be unforgiving, but it does have its rewards." Emily nodded. "I want to learn everything. I want to help, to understand, to be part of it." Jack didn't respond immediately. He wasn't used to opening his heart, to allowing someone into his carefully structured world. But as he watched Emily laughing, brushing Rusty, and helping with the cattle, he realized that having her around didn't feel like an intrusion. It felt right. Over the following weeks, the routine settled into something natural. Emily arrived each morning, eager to work and learn. Jack found himself adjusting, sharing more of his knowledge, and even enjoying the teaching. Rusty and the other horses seemed to sense the change too, responding well to Emily's growing confidence. Jack noticed that the ranch itself seemed to come alive with her presence. The mornings felt warmer, the work lighter, and the evenings more pleasant. Emily had a way of noticing small details, flowers that had bloomed, tracks in the dirt, the way a horse shifted its weight, that made Jack see the ranch through fresh eyes. Despite his caution, Jack began to appreciate Emily's company more than he expected. He still valued his solitude, but he realized that sharing moments, teaching someone, and seeing her excitement brought a new energy to his life. For the first time in years, Jack Sawyer felt that maybe, just maybe, his quiet life wasn't meant to stay completely alone. And so, the ranch, which had been silent for so long, began to fill with the sound of conversation, laughter, and the rhythmic steps of hooves on the earth. Jack's routine remained, but it had transformed. It wasn't just work anymore. It was a shared experience, a bond forming slowly but surely. Little did Jack know, the lessons in horseback riding were only the beginning. Emily's presence would soon challenge him in ways he never expected, not just teaching him patience, joy, and hope, but showing him that life could change in ways he had long thought impossible. As the days passed, Emily grew more confident in her riding. She learned how to guide Rusty through winding paths, how to keep her balance over uneven terrain, and how to sense the horse's movements. Jack watched quietly, noting her progress. Her hands had become steady, her posture firm, and her confidence was shining through every time she climbed onto Rusty's back. Jack had expected teaching to be a duty, a task that would occupy his time. But now he realized it had become something else entirely. He felt a quiet satisfaction in seeing Emily succeed, in knowing that he had helped her achieve what she had long dreamed of. There was a pride in teaching someone who genuinely wanted to learn, a feeling that he hadn't experienced in many years. One morning, Jack decided it was time for Emily to try riding alone. He led Rusty and Emily to a wide, open field, free from fences and obstacles. "Today, you ride without me walking beside you," Jack instructed, his voice calm but firm. "Stay alert, pay attention to Rusty, and trust what you've learned." Emily's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. "I'll be careful, sir." Jack stepped back, watching as Emily mounted Rusty. At first, her movements were cautious, and Rusty moved slowly under her guidance. But soon, she found a rhythm. The horse responded to her cues, and she began to feel the freedom of riding across the open field. She laughed, a soft, joyful sound, and Jack felt a warmth in his chest. It had been years since he had heard such laughter at the ranch. As the days turned into weeks, Jack and Emily spent almost every moment together on the ranch. She helped with chores, learned new skills, and became a natural companion for the horses. Jack noticed that the animals themselves responded to her presence. Rusty seemed calmer, the younger horses more obedient, and even the cows seemed to move more smoothly under her guidance. Emily had a gentle way about her, a patience that brought harmony to the ranch. Jack found himself talking to her more than he had talked to anyone in years. They spoke about the weather, the crops, the animals, and the land. But their conversations slowly became deeper. Emily asked about Jack's past, his childhood, and the lessons he had learned from life. At first, Jack hesitated to share. Some memories were painful, and he had kept them buried for a long time. But Emily's presence was different. She listened without judgment, asked questions with genuine curiosity, and respected his boundaries. One afternoon, as they rested under the shade of an old oak tree, Emily asked quietly, "Jack, have you ever been happy?" The question took him by surprise. He looked at her, studying her earnest expression. "I've had happy moments," he admitted slowly. "But life hasn't always been easy. I've lost people I cared about, and some things, well, they can leave scars." Emily nodded gently. "I understand, but maybe happiness can come again even after hard times. Sometimes it just needs a little spark to return." Jack looked away, thinking. Her words stirred something deep within him. For a moment, he imagined what it would be like to have someone to share the ranch with, someone to laugh with in the evenings, someone who cared about the land and the animals as much as he did. It was a thought he had not allowed himself to entertain in years, but now, with Emily sitting quietly beside him, it felt possible. Over the next few days, Emily began taking on more responsibility around the ranch. She learned how to feed the animals efficiently, mend fences, and even handle the younger horses during training sessions. Jack was impressed by her determination and attention to detail. She asked questions, took notes, and never hesitated to try new things. One morning, while checking the fences near the edge of the property, Emily spotted a stray calf that had wandered away from the herd. Without hesitation, she ran toward it, her small figure moving swiftly across the field. Rusty followed her calmly, sensing her intent. Jack watched from a distance, his heart pounding slightly. He had trusted her before, but seeing her take initiative like this made him realize just how capable she had become. Emily gently guided the calf back to the herd, speaking softly to calm it down. "There you go," she whispered. "Safe now?" Jack approached slowly, a rare smile on his face. "Well done," he said. "You've learned fast. I didn't expect you to handle that so calmly." Emily laughed lightly, brushing sweat from her forehead. "I learned from the best," she replied. Their bond continued to grow, but it wasn't just about work or writing. Emily had a way of making the small moments meaningful. She would notice the sunrise, comment on the way the wind moved through the grass, or point out flowers and birds Jack had never paid much attention to. Her perspective reminded him that beauty existed in simple things, and it was worth noticing. One evening, as they were finishing chores, Emily asked Jack if he would teach her to rope a calf. Jack hesitated. Roping could be dangerous if not done correctly, but he recognized the excitement in her eyes. "All right," he said, "but you follow my instructions exactly, no mistakes." They worked together in the corral. Jack demonstrated how to swing the rope, how to aim, and how to approach the calf safely. Emily tried several times, missing at first, but each time she learned something new. Her determination was unwavering. Finally, with a careful swing and steady hands, she successfully roped the calf. Jack couldn't hide his pride. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "You've got real talent," Emily beamed. "Thank you, Jack. I couldn't have done it without your guidance." Days turned into weeks, and Emily's presence became a normal part of Jack's life. They shared meals, worked side by side, and spent evenings talking under the stars. Jack realized he looked forward to her arrival every morning, her laughter, her questions, and even her stubborn determination to learn. The ranch felt alive in a way it hadn't for years. Yet, despite their growing closeness, Jack remained cautious. He had built walls around his heart over the years, and he wasn't sure if he was ready to let them down completely. Emily sensed this, but she was patient. She didn't rush him or demand more than he was willing to give. Her quiet confidence, her respect for his space, and her kindness slowly chipped away at the barriers he had built. One afternoon, Emily found an old photograph tucked inside one of the cabin's drawers. It was of Jack as a young boy, standing next to his father with a small horse beside them. She held it up and asked, "Who's this with you?" Jack took a deep breath, looking at the photo. "That's my father," he said softly. "He taught me everything I know about ranching and horses. He passed away when I was young. The ranch has been my way of keeping his memory alive." Emily nodded, her eyes gentle. "He would be proud of you, Jack. You've taken care of this land and these animals so well." Jack felt a lump in his throat. Her words were sincere, not pity, and they touched him in a way few things had in years. He realized that he was beginning to care deeply for her, not just as a student or helper, but as someone who had brought new light into his life. One morning, after a stormy night, Jack and Emily walked together to inspect the damage to the fences and the barn roof. The ground was muddy, puddles reflecting the gray sky. Emily struggled a bit in the mud, but Jack offered his hand, steadying her. She smiled at him, and for a moment the world seemed still. He realized how much he had come to depend on her presence, not just for help but for companionship. "You've changed this place," he said quietly. "It's brighter somehow." Emily laughed softly. "Maybe it was always bright. I just helped you notice it." Jack couldn't respond immediately. Her words lingered, and he felt something unfamiliar, a warmth that spread through his chest. He was beginning to see that life on the ranch didn't have to be lonely. Perhaps with Emily by his side, it could be joyful again. Their days continued, filled with work, lessons, laughter, and small moments of connection. Emily learned not just to ride and care for the animals, but to read the land, understand the weather, and respect the rhythms of life on the ranch. Jack found himself enjoying teaching more than he expected, not because of duty, but because he wanted to share his world with someone who truly appreciated it. By the time the sun set over the horizon one evening, painting the sky in gold and pink, Jack realized that he had begun to look at the future differently. The ranch was no longer just his solitude, it was a place of possibility. Emily had brought life, energy, and hope into his carefully ordered world, and he couldn't imagine going back to the quiet he had once cherished so completely. Little did Jack know, their bond would soon be tested in ways neither of them expected. Life on the ranch could be unpredictable, and challenges were coming. Challenges that would push Jack to reconsider what it meant to truly trust, to care, and to open his heart fully. But for now, as the stars began to twinkle above the plains, Jack and Emily stood side by side, watching the night settle over the land. The quiet that once defined his life had changed. It was no longer empty. It was filled with the promise of connection, growth, and a future he had long thought impossible. Life on the ranch had settled into a steady rhythm, with Jack and Emily working side by side, learning from each other, and enjoying the quiet beauty of the plains. But one morning, as the sun rose pale and low over the horizon, Jack noticed a problem that had the potential to disrupt everything. The fence along the northern pasture had been damaged. A section had collapsed during a recent storm, leaving the cattle free to wander into dangerous areas near the hills. Jack's heart sank as he surveyed the damage. The cattle were restless, grazing near a steep drop where a misstep could cause serious injury. This was the kind of situation that tested a rancher's skill, patience, and nerve. "Emily," Jack said, trying to keep his voice calm though tension ran through him, "we have a problem. The fence is down and some of the cattle are near the cliffs. We need to get them back into the pasture before anyone gets hurt." Emily's eyes widened, but she didn't hesitate. "Let's do it, Jack. I'll help you however I can." Jack nodded, grateful for her determination. Together they approached the herd. Rusty and a few other trained horses were ready. Emily mounted Rusty, while Jack took his own horse. They had done similar work before, but this time the stakes felt higher. The wind carried an uneasy chill, and the grass was slick from morning dew, making footing uncertain. "Remember," Jack instructed, "stay calm. The cattle will sense panic and they'll run if you get nervous. Keep your voice steady, move slowly, and guide them back carefully." Emily nodded, gripping the reins. She felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with fear. This was the first time she was managing a potentially dangerous situation on her own, and she knew the consequences of mistakes could be serious. But she also trusted Jack's guidance and her training. They began herding the cattle slowly, keeping them together as they moved toward the safer pasture. Emily's voice was calm, guiding Rusty as he nudged the cattle in the right direction. Jack's presence nearby gave her confidence. The animals responded to their steady approach, moving without panicking. Suddenly, one of the younger calves darted toward the cliffs. Emily's heart jumped. She leaned forward, directing Rusty to intercept the calf, but the slope made it tricky. Rusty's hooves slipped slightly in the wet grass. Jack shouted a warning and Emily's mind raced. She had to act quickly. "Steady, Rusty, steady," she whispered, guiding him carefully. The stallion responded, sidestepping the slippery patch and nudging the calf back toward safety. Emily let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Jack rode up beside her, his eyes narrowed but approving. "Good job. You kept your head, that's what matters." Emily smiled, relief flooding her. "Thanks, Jack. I was scared for a moment." Jack nodded. "Good. That fear keeps you alert. Just don't let it control you." After several tense minutes, they had guided all the cattle back to the safety of the pasture. Emily's hands were sore from holding the reins tightly, and her heart was still racing. Jack looked at her with a rare softness in his eyes. "You handled that well. I'm proud of you." Emily blushed slightly. "I couldn't have done it without your help." The rest of the day was spent repairing the fence. Jack showed Emily how to set posts firmly in the ground, tie strong knots, and weave the wires tightly so that the cattle couldn't escape again. It was hard work, demanding both strength and patience, but Emily threw herself into it. Jack noticed her determination and dedication, realizing she was more than just a student. She was a true partner in caring for the ranch. By evening, the fence was secure, and the cattle were safely back in their pasture. Both Jack and Emily were exhausted, their clothes damp with sweat and dirt streaked from the day's labor. They sat on the porch of the cabin, drinking water and watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. "You did really well today," Jack said quietly. "Not just with the horses or the fence, but with the cattle. That was dangerous, and you stayed calm." Emily smiled, wiping her forehead. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jack. You've taught me so much, more than I ever imagined I could learn in such a short time." Jack looked at her, seeing her eyes shining with excitement and pride. A thought struck him, a realization that he hadn't considered before. This wasn't just about teaching riding or ranch work. This was about trust, and for the first time in years, he was beginning to trust someone fully. But the challenge wasn't over. That night, as the wind howled outside the cabin and rain began to fall, Jack felt a gnawing worry. Storms like this could damage more fences, flood low areas of the pasture, and put the animals at risk. The ranch had always been unpredictable, but with Emily now part of the daily routine, he realized that he needed to protect both her and the animals. The next morning, they assessed the damage from the storm. A tree had fallen across one of the secondary fences, and water had collected in several low areas. Jack knew they had to act quickly before the cattle became stressed or wandered again. Emily didn't hesitate. "Let's get started, Jack. We can fix it together." Her courage surprised him. She wasn't afraid of hard work or challenges. She approached each task with focus and determination, learning quickly as Jack guided her through each step. He showed her how to clear the fallen tree safely, how to reinforce the weaker sections of the fence, and how to redirect the water flow to prevent flooding. Emily listened intently, following his instructions without complaint. While working, Jack noticed something else. Emily wasn't just learning from him, she was thinking for herself. She suggested better ways to secure posts, noticed weak spots in the fences he hadn't seen, and even found a safer path through the pasture for moving the cattle. Jack felt a mix of pride and surprise. She had become an invaluable part of the ranch, not just a student but a partner. By the afternoon, most of the storm damage was repaired. The cattle were safe, the fences secure, and the low areas drained. Emily was covered in dirt and sweat, but her smile was bright. "We did it," she exclaimed, laughing. Jack looked at her, feeling something unfamiliar, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. "Yes, we did," he said softly. He realized how much her presence had changed him. Life on the ranch was no longer just about survival or work. It was about sharing, about caring, and about facing challenges together. But the day's events also reminded Jack of the dangers of the ranch. He couldn't ignore the reality that life here was unpredictable. Storms, runaway cattle, or accidents could happen at any time. And now, with Emily here, he felt a new sense of responsibility, not just for the animals, but for her as well. He wanted to protect her, teach her, and ensure that she stayed safe. That night, as they sat by the fireplace, Emily spoke quietly. "Jack, I know this life isn't easy. It's hard work and sometimes it's dangerous. But I want to stay. I want to learn, help, and be part of this life. If you let me, I'll face every challenge with you." Jack felt a lump in his throat. He had spent so many years alone, avoiding attachments, fearing loss, and living only for himself and the ranch. But Emily's words reached him in a way nothing else had in years. She wasn't asking for comfort or easy days. She was asking to share the work, the challenges, and the life of the ranch. "You've got courage," he said quietly, "and a good heart. That's rare. This life isn't easy, Emily, and it's not always safe. But I think we can face it together." Emily smiled, her eyes bright with trust and hope. "I'll follow your guidance. I'll work hard, and I'll never give up." Jack nodded, feeling a sense of relief and pride. He had faced storms, cattle, and accidents before, but this, sharing his life with someone he trusted, was a new kind of challenge. And for the first time, he felt ready to face it. The next few weeks brought more lessons, more work, and more moments of connection. Emily became skilled at riding, handling the cattle, and managing the ranch. Jack taught her not just practical skills, but the deeper knowledge of reading the land, understanding the weather, and respecting the animals. He watched her grow with pride and a quiet joy he hadn't known he was capable of feeling again. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Jack realized something important. Life on the ranch would always be unpredictable and sometimes dangerous, but the presence of someone willing to face challenges with him, someone brave, kind, and capable, made it brighter, safer, and more meaningful. Emily wasn't just a student anymore. She had become a partner, a companion, and a friend he could trust. The days grew longer, and the ranch had settled into a rhythm that was both busy and fulfilling. Jack and Emily had faced storms, runaway cattle, and broken fences together. Every challenge had brought them closer, building a bond that was stronger than either of them had expected. Yet, even as life seemed to flow smoothly, Jack sensed that something significant was coming, a test of their trust, courage, and partnership. It began on a morning when the sky was heavy with clouds, the wind carrying a sharp chill across the plains. Jack was out in the pasture, checking on the cattle, when he noticed that Rusty was restless. The stallion stamped his hooves, ears flicking back and forth, sensing something that Jack could not yet see. Emily approached quietly, riding a younger horse she had recently learned to handle. "Is everything okay, Jack?" she asked. Jack shook his head, frowning. "I'm not sure." "Rusty senses something unusual. We should check the fences and the north pasture." As they rode together, a loud snap echoed across the field. One of the older fence posts had broken completely, leaving a large section of the northern pasture open. A few cattle had already wandered dangerously close to the cliffs. Jack's heart raced. This was the moment he had feared, a test of all they had learned and the trust they had built. "Emily," he said, his voice firm but calm, "we need to act quickly. Stay close, follow my lead, and trust your instincts. The cattle are scared, and any sudden movement could make them bolt." Emily nodded, gripping the reins tightly. She felt her heart pounding, but she also felt a surge of determination. She had trained for this moment, and she trusted Jack completely. Together, they approached the herd, speaking softly and using gentle nudges to guide the cattle back toward the safe pasture. One of the calves, young and skittish, broke away from the group, heading straight for the cliff's edge. Emily's eyes widened. Rusty responded immediately to her commands, moving with precision to intercept the calf. Jack rode alongside, ready to assist if needed. The wind howled, the grass was slippery from recent rain, and the stakes were high. "Steady, Rusty, easy now," Emily whispered, her voice calm despite the fear rising in her chest. Rusty responded perfectly, nudging the calf away from danger. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "Well done," he said, his eyes meeting hers with approval. Together, they managed to guide all the cattle safely back into the pasture. The fence was broken, but the animals were unharmed. Jack dismounted, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. Emily followed, her cheeks flushed from exertion but her eyes shining. "You were amazing," Jack said quietly. "You kept your head when it mattered most. That's what makes a good rider and a strong partner on a ranch." Emily smiled, though she was still catching her breath. "I couldn't have done it without you, Jack. You taught me how to stay calm and think ahead. I just tried to remember everything you showed me." Jack nodded, realizing that their partnership had grown deeper than he had imagined. She wasn't just learning from him. She had become someone he could rely on, someone who could handle challenges with skill, courage, and heart. After securing the cattle, they worked together to repair the fence. Jack showed Emily how to anchor the posts more securely, tie the wires tightly, and make the fence resilient against future storms. Emily learned quickly, suggesting improvements that even Jack had not considered. He felt a growing respect for her intelligence and intuition. By the time the work was done, the sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the plains. Jack and Emily stood side by side, surveying their work. The fence was solid, the cattle were safe, and the ranch felt whole again. A quiet sense of accomplishment settled over them, but Jack knew that this day had been more than just a physical challenge. It had been a test of trust, courage, and partnership, and they had passed together. As they returned to the cabin, Emily turned to Jack. "I've learned so much here," she said softly. "Not just about riding or ranch work, but about life, responsibility, and trust. I never thought I could feel this connected to a place or to someone. Thank you for letting me be part of it." Jack looked at her, feeling a lump in his throat. He had spent so many years alone, guarding his heart, and now he realized that he had come to care for Emily more than he had expected. "You've changed the ranch," he said quietly. "And you've changed me too. I didn't think I could feel this way again. But you've brought life and hope back into a place that was quiet for too long." Emily reached out and touched his arm gently. "Jack, I feel the same. I didn't expect to find this. Hard work, challenges, friendship, maybe even something more, but I'm glad I did." The warmth in Jack's chest grew. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't solitary. He imagined evenings filled with conversation, shared meals, laughter after long days, and quiet moments under the stars with someone he trusted completely. Emily had become more than a student or companion. She had become family, someone who made his life brighter, safer, and more meaningful. Over the following weeks, their bond deepened further. Emily became confident handling the ranch alone for short periods, managing the cattle and even training the younger horses. Jack guided her, but he also let her make decisions, trusting her judgment. The ranch thrived under their combined effort, and life felt fuller than it had in years. One evening, after a long day of riding and repairs, they sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The sky was painted in brilliant shades of gold, orange, and pink. A gentle breeze rustled the grass, carrying the scent of wildflowers and earth. For a moment, they simply sat in comfortable silence, feeling the connection to the land, the animals, and each other. "You know, Jack," Emily said softly, "I used to think a life like this would be lonely. Hard work, isolation, endless chores, but it's not lonely anymore, not with you here, not like this." Jack smiled, a rare warmth lighting his face. "I feel the same. I thought I could only be content alone, but I see now that life is richer when shared. You've reminded me of that, Emily." She reached for his hand, and for the first time, Jack didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined naturally, a simple gesture that spoke of trust, connection, and something deeper than words could express. It was a moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just in their relationship, but in the life of the ranch itself. As the weeks turned into months, Jack and Emily faced more challenges as the plains were never predictable. A summer heatwave tested the water supply, and a sudden hailstorm damaged crops. But each challenge was met with cooperation, skill, and shared determination. Together they repaired fences, cared for the animals, and adapted to whatever nature brought. Through it all, their bond grew stronger. Jack began to notice small changes in himself. He laughed more freely, felt lighter despite the hard work, and even began to imagine a life that included Emily in ways he had never allowed before. He realized that trust, patience, and care could lead not just to success on the ranch, but to happiness in life. One evening, after a long day of work, they watched the sunset together from the highest hill on the ranch. The sky glowed in brilliant shades of pink, gold, and violet. Rusty and the other horses grazed quietly nearby. The world felt peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, Jack allowed himself to feel complete. "Look at that," Emily said softly. "Isn't it beautiful?" Jack nodded, his eyes following the colors of the fading sun. "It is, and it's even better when shared." Emily leaned closer, resting her head briefly on his shoulder. Jack felt a warmth spread through him, a feeling of belonging, connection, and hope. He realized that the ranch, the horses, and the work he loved were all part of his life, but Emily had brought the final piece, the companionship and trust he had long avoided. The stars began to twinkle above the plains as they rode back to the cabin. Jack felt a deep sense of peace. The ranch had been his home for many years, a place of work, solitude, and quiet reflection. But now it was a place of life, laughter, partnership, and hope. Emily had changed everything, not by demanding it, but by simply being herself, courageous, kind, and determined. Jack understood that life on the ranch would always come with challenges, storms, and surprises, but he no longer faced them alone. Together, he and Emily would meet whatever came their way. They had learned to trust each other, rely on one another, and share the joys and hardships of ranch life. And in doing so, they had built something stronger than either of them had expected, a bond that was unshakable, a life that was richer, and a future filled with promise. As they entered the cabin that night, tired but fulfilled, Jack looked at Emily and smiled. "You've made this place more than a ranch. You've made it a home, and you've made me realize that life is meant to be shared." Emily returned his smile, her eyes bright with warmth and trust. "And you've made me realize that hard work, courage, and kindness can change everything. I'm glad I found this place. I'm glad I found you." Jack felt a quiet joy he hadn't known in years. The ranch had always been his refuge, but now it was a home filled with companionship, love, and hope. The cowboy who once lived alone had found someone to share the land, the work, and his life with, and for the first time in a long time, he felt truly whole. As the night settled over the plains, Jack and Emily sat together on the porch, watching the stars, listening to the gentle sound of Rusty's hooves in the barn, and feeling the wind whisper through the grass. The ranch, once silent and solitary, was alive with life, laughter, and love. The cowboy's heart, once closed and guarded, had opened. And in that quiet, magical moment, both Jack and Emily knew that everything had changed, for the better, forever.